All right, so let's go ahead and pick up on part two of African Americans and the Civil War. And we're picking up at the same spot that we left off. Black men fight for the Union. The 1st South Carolina Volunteers in May of 1862 are going to be under General David Hunter. And they are going to begin recruiting former slaves in South Carolina, and some are going to be forced to volunteer. He organized a 500-man regiment, and they become known as the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. Congress is going to refuse to pay them, but is going to pass the Second Confiscation Act and Militia Act of 1862. Now, the Second Confiscation Act is going to free all slaves of rebel owners. Now, this is before emancipation, so it is a step towards emancipation. Before, we said in the last video that Emancipation Proclamation does establish as the cause of the war. We see some of that before. And so the Second Confiscation Act frees all slaves of rebel owners if they are contributing to the war effort. So if the owners are contributing to the war effort with their slaves, then the slaves can be confiscated. And so that's going to be used in this case. And then we have the Militia Act of 1862, which is going to authorize Lincoln to enlist black soldiers, which again is really the first time legally that's going to happen. We actually see black soldiers fighting in every war in America's history, including the Revolutionary War, which we would consider one of the first people to die for the Revolutionary War to be a black man, Crispus Attucks, right? So we see that throughout history, but this is the first time we really see it in law, and that's the Militia Act. Very important there. So we have probably the most famous black regiment in the war, not probably, the most famous black regiment in the war. In the North, free black men are going to enlist with the help of the Black Committee. The Black Committee is going to include Frederick Douglass, Martin Delany, Charles Remond, and Henry Highland Garnett. They are convinced that black men fighting in the war would earn them respect as citizens. So they enthusiastically support black men enlisting, and so they're going to recruit black men into this regiment in Massachusetts, because if you know anything about Massachusetts at the time, or even today, there aren't a lot of black people in Massachusetts, especially in most of it. And so we are going to see that they're recruiting all over the North to put together this one unit. So much so that Frederick Douglass, famous abolitionist, former slave, is going to actually have his sons enlisted and fight in this regiment. In May of 1863, they are deployed to battle, and we have thousands of people who are going to come out and cheer them on, including, again, William Lloyd Garrison, who lives in the area, who's cheering from his porch, who's saluting them, because what it means, again, that potentially that it's going to change the mindsets of people about black people, not only in war, but really just in general, what type of people they are. Lincoln felt specifically that Southerners seeing black men in uniform, and these are his words, would end the rebellion at once. And of course, that did not happen. Many whites accepted black soldiers because they preferred a black man to die as opposed to a white man. So this is sort of I don't know if it's necessarily what we call racist. This next part, I would say, is. But the idea of being, let them go fight. Let them go fight in the war. It's better than me dying. And that's exactly what Sambo's right to be killed is. And I won't read that to you, but essentially it says, I'll let Sambo, which is a derogatory term for a black slave. I'll let Sambo be shot instead of myself on every day in the year, right? So I guess that makes sense. They don't want to necessarily fight for their rights. Let blacks do it. It's better they die for this than us. So I guess that's logical. However, in the military, they are going to face extreme discrimination. Famously, black people have been in the Navy since its creation, and so they've been a part of the Navy. We're going to see black people in the Navy. They are overwhelmingly there. However, they are treated terribly by white soldiers. They are spat upon. They're kicked. They're called names and things of that nature. They're made to do the worst of jobs. In the Army, you have black soldiers who are fighting, but they are going to be paid less than whites. Now, I guess this is probably a surprise, or it shouldn't be to anyone, that they would pay the black soldiers less. as they were paid less in every aspect. But this the Union still again paying, despite fighting for freedom, they're not necessarily talking about equality. So they do pay less than whites, $13 a month versus $10 a month. The law was passed. There was a law passed that changed this. Kind of, and that's because this law states that if you were at some point in time a slave, then you could not be paid equally to a white man. However, for everyone else, if you enlisted before 1864, okay, so if you enlisted before 1864, you could get equal. You were to be paid equally. So if you were never a slave and you were enlisted by a certain time, then you could be and had to be paid equally. So it's some progress, but not entirely there. Black men are facing an enemy that thought they should be enslaved in the South, alongside an ally, the North, that thought they were inferior fighters and lesser people. So this is incredibly difficult to imagine fighting next to people who still don't believe in your equality, but fighting against people who think that you should be enslaved. It's, I guess, a hard choice, but probably not that hard. They fought in nearly every battle after they could enlist. So blacks fought in nearly every battle following their enlistment. They suffered disproportionately high casualties when compared to whites. This is true in a lot of wars. Is following this time that black soldiers have a higher probability to die in battle, and usually the reason is because of the way they're used in battle. And we'll see as we move forward that is the case here as well. Including this one, the assault on Battery Wagner. Frustrated that the North could not take Fort Sumter, and Fort Sumter, remembers, where the first shots are fired. They felt that this was a huge strategic victory. They wanted to take Fort Sumter, and then they would be able to take Charleston, which is a major seaport for the Confederacy. And so they really wanted Charleston. Colonel Shaw is going to volunteer. I don't actually know his first name, but Colonel Shaw is going to volunteer to lead the 54th Regiment in order to attack this encampment, this fort. And so at sunset, they are going to let them lead this large group of soldiers, a large group of white soldiers. The 1st Regiment is going to be the 54th. At sunset, they're going to charge. They're going to take heavy casualties. 42% of them are going to die or are injured. It's going to, the news of this brave effort, even though it failed, they were not able to take Fort Sumter. This brave effort is going to spread, and it's going to dispel for a short time this myth that black men lacked the nerve to fight. They 100% had the nerve to fight. They had the ability to fight, and they did do that. If you've seen it, you recognize this scene. If you have not, it is a fantastic movie, but it does inspire the movie Glory in 1989, which has Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, pretty much all the black male actors in 1989 are in that movie. Pretty much, it's a pretty comprehensive cast. So quality movie, quality story, and you can see it there. Then you have stories like Olustee and the Crater. In 1864, that same regiment, the 54th, are going to march 110 miles and 100 hours to join 2 black regiments at the Battle of Olustee in northern Florida. This is, again, an amazing will to fight, just to march in that manner, to travel that distance. General George Meade is going to replace a black unit at the Battle of Petersburg. So this is separate. Sorry, they're fighting in Olustee. Meade is going to. He doesn't like the idea of blacks fighting and getting this praise. So where you would have had blacks fighting at this battle in Petersburg, which essentially is a very, very fascinating and enjoyable story in terms of war, right? So as much as war can be enjoyable, essentially there was a large camp of Confederate soldiers, and under it there were tunnels that they used for coal mining, and the Union is going to get access to those tunnels and decide that the best way to fight back is to run explosives under the tunnels and try to take them out from underneath. And they do that. They blow up the tunnels. It's one of the largest man-made explosions to that time. They're going to blow up the tunnels. They're going to completely bury or collapse that fort that is on top of it. But Meade had replaced a well-trained black unit with an inadequately trained white unit because he liked the idea of them fighting better. And this again is the Union, and they're rushing in. They don't take the time to think. They don't take the time to do what they're supposed to do, and they actually go into the wrong area, and they end up getting trapped where they are by their advancement, and they end up losing a huge battle, despite having a great plan, although very deadly and dastardly. But they end up losing this because of the refusal to allow black men to fight and have that credit. So 4,000 people die in that battle. It's a very bloody occurrence there. The Confederates, there's mixed reaction to how they feel about this. Some change their views on the valor of black troops, right? Which is what the Black Committee and Frederick Douglass had hoped for. Others resented having to fight and sometimes to lose to blacks, and responded by enslaving or killing prisoners of war. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but some are going to see, these black guys can fight, and that changes that whole notion of inferiority and all these different things. For some people, it does that. For others, it does not. Right? They resent having to fight the war. They resent having to lose to them. And because of that, they're going to become increasingly brutal to blacks that they encounter. They were deemed by the Confederates in some cases as not legitimate soldiers who have protection under the rules of war. So in that case, a lot of times, black soldiers who were captured were often killed or essentially murdered because this is outside of war. They're not killing them in war. In war, when you have war, there are rules. If someone says that they're not going to fight anymore, if they surrender, you're supposed to take them as a prisoner. So instead of doing that, they often killed them or abused them. Confederate authorities treated even free black soldiers who were captured as escaped slaves. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but yes, they would enslave free black soldiers and put them into slavery. And Lincoln issued General Order 11, threatening to execute a Confederate for every soldier executed. Same for enslavement. So essentially, to enslave every white man who enslaved a free black man. And so this is a remarkable thing to say, right? Because what he's essentially saying and what he's essentially arguing is that soldiers, any soldier, including black soldiers, are so important that if you kill one of our soldiers, we will kill one of yours. And that's a remarkable thing to say about black soldiers. Doesn't necessarily work out that way because we see Fort Pillow. And this is an important story for those of us here in Tennessee. And I want you to notice the name that is bolded on the screen because he will come up multiple times in history and is still mentioned often today. April 12, 1864, in Fort Pillow, Tennessee, Confederates under command of Nathan Bedford Forrest slaughtered 300 black troops after they had surrendered. If you're not sure what you remember about Nathan Bedford Forrest, a couple of things about him. He is later going to form and be the first Grand Wizard of the KKK. That is sort of his role. He is going to lead these slaughters like this. He is going to be in charge of some of the worst prisoner of war camps where white soldiers are even made to starve and treated terribly and all these different things. And that's Nathan Bedford Forrest, who we honor still today. We have a national statewide Nathan Bedford Forrest Day, which has been very controversial. And we have a statue in our state capitol honoring Nathan Bedford Forrest. And this is why people do not like that. And it's one of those things is because of stories like this, where he is slaughtering 300 black troops who have surrendered, which is a war crime. It is not allowed then. It's not allowed now. Now, that being said, Lincoln had issued this remarkable statement that I mentioned before in General Order 11 that said, if you kill one of our slaves, we'll kill one of yours. However, they do not retaliate. They do not use that order. They do not punish them before or after, or during or after the war. And that's why a lot of these people, like Nathan Bedford Forrest, are allowed to go on and do what they do. But black soldiers do, however, come back to oppose and to avenge this effort. And so later at war, where they're fighting near Petersburg, they are reportedly going to kill Confederate prisoners. So again, that's not typically what you do, right? You don't have the prisoners, but they did break war ethic and law as a retaliation for what Nathan Bedford Forrest and those did. Doesn't make it right. Two wrongs don't make it right, but we do know why they did it. The Fort Pillow Massacre here in the state of Tennessee is the worst atrocity against black troops that happens during the Civil War, and that is saying a lot. So I find this particular portion very interesting, right? We know that black men and women have fought in war and do fight in war, but looking at all the roles that they have, and we'll see a couple here over the next couple of slides. In 1862, Robert Smalls he's on a ship, he's going to fire up the boiler so that the ship can sail, and he's going to sneak it past Confederate ships to the Union ships, where he will be free, and he frees himself and 15 other slaves in the process, which is a remarkable thing to do. It's incredibly dangerous, and it's remarkable to liberate himself and 15 other slaves. Harriet Tubman, I should also say Robert Smalls at the time was 23 years old when he did that. In 1863, Harriet Tubman organized a spy ring. Amazing Harriet Tubman, who has already freed dozens, if not into the hundreds of slaves during the war with the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman is going to organize a spy ring in the South Carolina Low Country and helped organize an expedition that destroyed plantations and freed 800 slaves. Right? We know there's 4 million slaves in captivity, and 800 is a small number, but when you're one person doing this, and I say one person, she's doing it with a group of people, that is amazing. That is an amazing feat, and something to continue to celebrate. I find this story very fascinating as well. They're both of these stories. A black couple near Fredericksburg, Virginia, were conveying messages. So the woman was able to steal messages. She would wash the laundry and she would hang the blankets and shirts and things of that nature in a pattern, okay, to send a message to her husband, who was a cook for Union troops. And so he would see the pattern from a distance, he would know what she was saying, and then he would relay the message to Union troops, and this was used to counteract some of the intelligence that was happening in the Confederacy. That is, again, a remarkable thing to think about when we're talking about the effort that they're going through and what they're doing to undermine this. Same with Mary Elizabeth Bowser, who is just awesome, right? Worked as a servant in the Confederate White House. She overheard Confederate President Jefferson Davis, so she's in the president's house serving him. She overhears him, but she was literate. Unlike most slaves, she was literate, and she was able to read the correspondence that Davis had been receiving from Confederates and so on and so forth. And she is going to read that correspondence and then relay the information. Now, she is going to be figured out. They're going to find out what she's doing and figure out. They get suspicious, and so she does flee. She does get away. She flees, and in the process, she does not succeed, but she attempts to burn down the Southern White House, which is, again, just a remarkable story that I highly appreciate. Let's see. By no means did all white people accept blacks in the North or South. I want to be clear about that. The South, obviously fighting to enslave people. In the North, they do not want blacks to necessarily be equal to them for a couple of reasons. It'll take jobs away from them if blacks move up and do that. But also, just in some cases, they believe that they're superior. That's what if we've talked about, that's what they've been taught to believe all of this time. And so Irish Catholic Americans are riled up by Northern Democrats. They're angry that they're being drafted for a war to defeat slavery. So again, Irish Catholics are discriminated against themselves in the North. They are treated terribly. They're not given jobs. They are, to some degree, the black people of the North, because there are not black people there yet in large numbers. They are treated very, very terribly. And so now they're being drafted to fight for a country that treats them this way, to fight for, then to potentially die for, freeing slaves who will A, probably take their jobs, and B, who are not them, to benefit other people. And so they resent it, and you can understand why they resent it. Not that what they do is acceptable, because in 1863 they do have a riot as they are being drafted. They attack draft offices, they attack black people and kill them, they lynch black people, and they also burn down a black orphanage, which had been vacated, so there were no children in it, but it was something that was used for orphan black children, which again, pretty terrible. Union troops and slaves, also refugees. Some Union troops are brutally violent towards blacks, and others are, while others, are fighting specifically to free the slaves. So some of these troops are, they're abhorrently terrible to blacks. They are. There's a story in, I think it's Georgia, where a group of white soldiers are going to actually rape a 8-year-old black girl. This is these terrible stories like this, that they are brutal. There's another story in Georgia with Sherman's army where one of the soldiers is going to fire his gun into a crowd of black children, and one of the children is wounded. He does stand trial, which is surprising. However, he does get off, which is not surprising. He's not found innocent, but it's a technicality. And throughout the war, blacks are running to freedom. They're doing that because they're afraid that they're going to be enslaved or killed or whatever. But if they run to freedom, they could be re-enslaved. They could be executed legally and by law. And so it is a very dangerous thing. They'll also pick up, again, with Sherman's groups, they'll pick up those soldiers. They'll see the large groups of Union soldiers marching through, and they would just leave their plantations with no food, no belongings, and they would follow them. And a lot of them followed Sherman to Savannah. So let's talk briefly about black people and the Confederacy. So the Southerners are at a disadvantage in population. And a huge disadvantage. The North has 22 million people. The South has roughly 9 million, but 3.9 million of those are slaves. Right, so that is a huge disadvantage. However, they felt because they had slaves, they could afford to send most of their men to war, and prevent losing that, whatever you would say, that advantage they have, that prevent having to keep some people behind, like the North would, to run and protect their land and that type of thing. The Confederacy passed a law to allow the impressment of slaves. Impressment is to forcibly put people into slavery. And so the Confederacy is going to pass a law to allow the impressment of slaves for up to 60 days as they're needed. And they would pay the slave owners, right? This is the most Confederate thing to do, right? To enslave people and to pay the people who own them, right? But, again, should this be surprising? I guess not. But they did pass a law, again, a very Confederate thing to do. They passed a law where large slave owners who owned 20 or more men were exempt from service. This is going to enrage poor white Southerners who do not own 20 slaves and feel it is unfair that they are now fighting a white man's war to preserve their slavery system. And so it's going to undermine their issue a little bit, and it's going to make, as all wars do, it's going to make it an issue between the rich, who often are able to avoid fighting, and the poor, who usually have to fight and die. Confederates are going to enslave free black people. After the Emancipation Proclamation, as you see here on the screen, Jefferson Davis, who is the president of the Confederacy, is going to order the enslavement of all free black men as chattel slaves. Remember talking about chattel slavery before, forever. All right, this is an escalation, right? To look at even the free black men in the South, but even the captured free black men in the North, if they went into the North and captured free black men, which we saw earlier, to enslave them. And that's what they are doing. And he issues that order in response to say that what this says is the purpose right? The purpose of black humans is to be enslaved and to be servants to white people, to be in servants to white men. And it reaffirms that the purpose of all of this is slavery, right? Again, I want to be clear on that because over the years, we've been taught at times or told that maybe there was another issue and all these different things. It is, in fact, in their own words and through their own actions, slavery. Some free blacks in the South are going to offer to help the Confederacy they're going to offer it up. They're going to volunteer to help them because they fear that if the Confederacy would rescind their status. They would make them slaves. We just saw on the last slide, they did that. They made all free slaves, all free black people slaves. And so they do that, and they feared they would do that, but they did it anyway. They hoped that proving that they were loyal would show that they were different than those enslaved. And this is one of those statements that when I say it, is problematic for the black community in general when you talk about, at the time, the idea, that separation of free versus enslaved, that they are better than the others. We're not like them, we're better than them, we are good black people, or we're free black people, and that's different, and that's what they're doing here, is hoping that they can prove that difference and keep their freedom while understanding that there is a group of people who will stay enslaved. And finally, as the war progresses, the Confederacy is going to recognize that they are losing, and they're going to begin considering black soldiers. Many are going to feel that it undermines their entire cause in the war. And so notice when this is happening, they're considering this, but people are saying, look, if you put black people in uniform and you have them fight in the war in large numbers, I think 300,000 is the number they were proposing. If you do that, if you have that, it undermines this entire notion that we're saying that black men are slaves, they're inferior, they cannot fight, they cannot be men, they cannot be honorable, they can't do any of these things. It undermines that entire idea, and it does. It undermines the entire concept of white supremacy on which slavery is based. It does do that. However, General Robert E. Lee, who is the commander of the troops for the Confederacy, is going to favor emancipation. And it is going to become law in March of 1865 that they can enlist black people, and it's going to be so late in the war that I think only like one regiment is going to be formed under this law, as the war is going to end in April. Remembering that just around that same time is going to be the assassination of April 15th is going to be the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So that is the end of this section on this particular issue, and so I want to make sure that you have an understanding of what blacks and African Americans are going to go through during this war, the importance of the war, the importance of it in terms of freedom, in terms of freeing slaves, and in terms of shaping who we are as a country and who African Americans are and their role in the country. So make sure, hopefully, that you get this, you've taken notes, and now you should be able to answer all of the questions on the assignment. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.